right to the high point of the line.
We know Professor Sawyer as a professor, a teacher. He is a nice and supportive teacher with a particularly chill vibes, and at the same time, he's a very inspiring and enlightening mentor with a very wide vision. He is always able to come up with thousands of ideas regardless of what type of music you are working on. But how much do you know of him as a composer? Professor Eric Sawyer was born on June 2nd, 1962 in Brookhaven, New York. He studied at Harvard College as an undergraduate. Personally, I think his liberal arts education in undergrad contributed to his liberal arts soul in his composition career.
Well, I was lucky enough to have piano lessons from very early, so I was always learning piano music and pretty much wrote according to the style of the music that I was learning, which went starting at Bach. So that was the first music I tried to imitate. And then as I went on and played sonatas, I would try to write something like that. And I didn't really get to love 20th century music until probably sometime in high school. And that might have been Prokofiev was my entree, and then other 20th century music. When I went to music camp, I heard some modern music that I liked, particularly Russian music, and Bartok string quartets.
In Harvard College, he majored in music only, but he also took some other classes, such as computer science. Indeed, he dedicated his first computer program to the composition of counterpoint. And you know what? The song Sawyer played and sung at the beginning of the video, Human Touch, is from his recently composed song cycle, inspired by the hot topic of artificial intelligence. To integrate the music and lyrics better, Sawyer wrote his own lyrics. You can hear how the words are strictly metered and rhymed to fit perfectly with the tritone pattern that symbolize machine calculation. Professor Sawyer's musical language isn't that complicated. The trend by the generation most influenced by early 20th century composers, he found his interest in harmonic very early. As I mentioned before, Professor Sawyer is interested in breaking the boundary between classical music and jazz or pop. One way he does is by his own lyrics, and the other way is the harmony language.
I was also listening to jazz and popular music, which everybody was listening to. And the sounds of that music was not necessarily triadic all of the time. And so a way of making harmony that still was expressive and still structured the music, but wasn't root progressions and triads all of the time. That was sort of a continuum from that into the dissonances of modernist music became something I was interested in. And I think in order to get the full range of expression that resonates with me in particular, I need all of those sounds. And I guess that's my advice usually to students is find all of the musical vocabulary that speaks to you and find a way to make it all work together.
Yet as a liberal art person, the tools that Professor Sawyer uses in his musical composition aren't limited to musical language. The lyrics he writes, for example, shows his talent in literature. Professor Sawyer classifies 7 of his work under the category opera or theater. The latest one, Onion, is yet to be updated on the website or get a performance. Among the 7, 3 have strict traditional opera form. Liberal art spirit shines the most in his opera writing. The opera Our American Cousin, written in 2006, was based on a play by Tom Taylor. Depicting the assassination of President Lincoln, it aims to tell an American myth in an unfamiliar way, with both poetic and musical language drawn from the past but refracted through the present. The Garden of Martyrs, written 2012, portrays the discrimination against Irish immigrants in 1806. The exhibition of the past anti-immigrant sentiment also speaks to the issue of immigration in the US today. In this video, however, we will focus on the third one, the Scarlet Professor, which won him the American Prize 2019 for the Best Opera Composition. In this opera, Professor Sawyer collaborates with the same librettist, Harley Erdman, 4 years after they premiered The Garden of Martyrs. The opera tells a story of Newton Irving, a renowned English professor who got arrested and disgraced for possessing gay magazines and materials in 1960s. And it premiered in 2017 at Smith College, the exact campus where the events took place.
And it was Harley, I think, who brought me a book that was written right around 2000 by a local author named Barry Worth, a reporter who had written about events in Northampton in 1960. And just that in itself really appealed to me because I had done historical operas, and 1960 is still historical, but much closer to the present. And the idea of being able to engage with that time and culture and music was appealing. But also, it seemed like a story that was not well known, that should be better known, that would tell itself very well in opera.
Although Professor Sawyer doesn't write the words this time, his participation in the opera is still far beyond just writing down musical notes. Firstly, he is deeply engaging with the moral and the meaning of the topic. Though he doesn't call himself an activist, in his operatic composition, his focus of topics reflect his interest in the condition of humanity and his profound social perception. Indeed, a lot of musicians' works today are kind of engaging with some activist thoughts anyway right now. But as a composer with liberal arts education, Professor Sawyer starts thinking about that much earlier.
It's the story of a professor at Smith College, so something that's very close to home, and a scandal that he got caught up in because of the times. Right before the civil rights movement and the greater freedoms of the 1960s, there was a kind of policing of the mail system for anything that was deemed obscene. And at that time, sending photos of men in bathing suits was considered obscene, and that was legislated against and enforced by, of all things, by the U.S. Postal Service. So Barry Worth's book is a history. It's not a fiction. And so it's not something that immediately can be adapted into a libretto. It's not something he ever imagined would be fictionalized or turned into an opera. But we saw the plight of the protagonist, Newton Irving, this distinguished literary scholar at Smith College, who worked on Nathaniel Hawthorne and the Scarlet Letter. We saw his life story as being not only tragic and remarkable as an event of the early 1960s and an event at Smith College in our own backyard, but we saw it as a fascinating resonance between his life and his work, because in writing about the Scarlet Letter, he was talking about privacy and shame and secrets and exposure and being forced to be looked at by the larger society as a criminal.
The success of the opera is inseparable from both its music and its drama. It indeed impresses me not only as a music major, but also as an English major. The timeline of the present moved forward chronically from the time after Arvin was arrested, but they are also intertwined with the flashbacks in the past, so we, the audience, can know the whole context. The title The Scarlet Professor comes from the Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne in 1850. The heroine Hester Prynne has an illegitimate daughter and had to wear a scarlet letter A to signify the stigma of adultery. But no matter how people mortify her, she never says the name of the Reverend de Mystère, the father of the child. In the opera, Hester becomes a character who converses with Arvin in his own literary imagination, which allows us to see a lot of Arvin's inner world while everything outside is going on. Now let's look at the music. Reviewer Marvin J. Ward observed that composer Eric Sawyer has a penchant for choosing historical events, especially local ones, as the subject of his operas. This is the third that I have seen, each more polished and refined than its predecessor, with The Scarlet Professor scoring a 10 out of 10 in my book. Besides the recognition from the awards and the reviewers, this is among Sawyer's favorite composition, if it's not the favorite one. Because the story is set in 1960s, it allows Professor Sawyer to engage with the music of that time. Jazz, rock, pop, remember? As I mentioned, a fusion of these genres with classical music is where Professor Sawyer's interest lies.
Often, if you go to the movies, music will be chosen to have something to do with the time and place of the setting, especially if it's something historical. And in opera, yes, I think, in Carmen, there's a lot of Spanish music because it's supposed to be set in Spain. And, that it's something that you want to do well if you're going to do it, because, if you just pay, you don't actually try to get into any sort of depth of engagement with the music that you're using, that can be problematic. So I have tried to engage in a limited way, first of all, not make the whole piece that, but make some tie-in, and to try to do in a way that's meaningful, that kind of is still my music, but allows a kind of historical prism to be used.
The orchestration of this opera consists of a small chamber orchestra with only 9 instruments: flute, clarinet, tenor saxophone, percussion, piano, violin, cello, both string and electronic bass. Tenor sax is a jazz instrument, doesn't need much explanation. And for percussion, Professor Sawyer includes the drum set to engage with the 1960 American music. And having both types of bass allow him to switch quickly between different styles of songs. Now let's go over some specific numbers to have a better sense of the flexibility and diversity in Professor Sawyer's style. Pink Professor is the first chorus of the whole opera, when Postmaster General is leading the tour of all of the confiscated obscene material that was seized through the mail. Cut time, fast pace, steady beats, clear phrases, regular cadences, dotted rhythm. Pink Professor is surely a march. This choice of topic makes a lot of sense, since this number means to show the post office determination in their mission, which is eliminating all the obscene magazines. However, the choices of percussion instrument here and the chromatism here leans closer to jazz. This mismatch here makes us wonder whether this march is serious or not. Indeed, this contradiction to me is a very good choice, as it makes the piece satirical and successfully show us how the materials made the people titillated at the same time, though being under this strict suppression in the name of morality.
One time when I was 17, some buddies and I went out for a drive. Just a bunch of kids having a high old time across the state line with a case of beer.
Every Day I Am Alive is an aria by Ned, who is Arvin's friend and young colleague. This is pretty much the song that exhibits his character. While he is also homosexual, he doesn't share the same guilt and shame as Arvin does. Maybe because he belongs to a younger generation, he sort of sees the way of near future. This song has a strong blues feeling. Professor Sawyer here uses the electronic bass. The blues shuffles or walking bass here reinforce the trance-like rhythm and form a repetitive effect of grooves. Such music fits well with the alcohol, both at the very moment and in Ned's recount. However, this song at the same time is a very affirmative song about one's personal identity, which we can see through in the steady harmony. The bass switches between A pedal and D pedal, sometimes introducing E chord to form a cadence. Noticeably, the D chord is usually used as a word painting, signifying the emotional uplifting, and it would retrieve to A chord whenever it finishes. It gives us a feeling that Ned knows where he is going.
Talk to me about lamentable curses. Don't moan to me about eternal shame. They will never cast their shadows on my way.
The road ends here, then we're at the brink. They've pried their way into my dismal chamber.
The Road Ends Here is a duet between Newton Arvin and Ned Spofield. After Arvin is arrested, he says the names of Ned and another young colleague, implicating them into the trouble. This duet took place before the trial. Newton is pessimistic about his fate, while Ned wants to fight. In the juxtaposition of their singing lines, we can see a sharp contrast between their attitude. Here, Newton is singing his aria alone. Over 60 years old, and having already established his fame in literature study, Newton feels caught and here resigns to his fate. This aria is pretty much typical Professor Sawyer's classical music writing, where the lines are lyrical, the harmony are sensationally effective, but not necessarily functional. Here Ned joins Arvin. Compared to the lyrical long phrase of Arvin, Ned has short and intense phrases. The lyrics is more colloquial, so is the music. I would say the articulation here is pretty much close to speaking, or we say recitative. Though his line picks up what Arvin lives, their harmonic doesn't agree as it proceeds. Let's look here. Ned picks up the F sharp that Arvin just sings, but soon makes a big dissonant crunch with the minor second, D against D sharp. Thus, we can see that, though they are physically side by side here, They are each in their distinct own words and unable to communicate.
Will you be brave and be with me forever? Will you next often sigh with me? 1,000,000 chains are breaking in the jails of this land. 1,000,000 hearts are aching to take a stand. 1,000,000 minds.
1,000,000 Chants is perhaps the most uplifting moment in this dismal opera. Irving, Ned, and another involved professor are fired after the trial. Although their friendship is broken by Irving's betrayal, Ned and Helen, another faculty member, come to visit Irving. Ned shares his determination to continue pleading innocence and fighting the charge. Historically, Ned's baffled succeed. A state Supreme Court decision eventually overturned the conviction, marking a sea change in national attitudes toward privacy and civil liberties. Melodious, repetitive, and short, 1,000,000 Chants is a typical street protest song, reinforced by a cappella, call and response, and body percussion. This is a moment when you can clearly see the multi-dimension of opera, how its musical expression is intertwined with context, characterization, emotion, and etc. And you can also see here how well Professor Sawyer executes the multidimensionality as a liberal arts person. The melody is originally written by Professor Sawyer, though it's pretty far from his most skilled style. But here, this musical genre or form that he chose works perfectly with the rebellion theme, and, in my opinion, it outdoes any other musical tools that I can possibly imagine.
The walls will crumble and come down. Yes, open up your eyes, and let yourself be found. For the walls will crumble and come down.
So you can see that it's inevitable to talk about the whole opera holistically if we want to study Professor Sawyer's skill in a particular opera. But now I eventually would like to zoom in the specific scene that I particularly like. The scene, marked as dance sequel, take place right after Ned and Irving comes out of closet to each other. It actually starts with the transition from the last scene, where Irving plays the recording of newly released album of singer Fischer Diersko. The recording indeed is the first song of Schubert's song cycle Winterreise, Gute Nacht, which I am playing in the background right now. I would say this song is a small but good choice, as it is about unrequited lover, and more crucially, it addresses loneliness. In the middle of the song, the orchestra take over the recording, and the scene change begins. If you hear something here, you are right. In the later part of last century, Somewhere Over the Rainbow has the intonation of LGBTQ movement. And here, the quotation works perfectly with the Gute Nacht. Since the dance sequel here is symbolic by itself, I think a very symbolic quotation here works very well. It's probably just like you want to quote Tristan chord if you are crazily in love. Here comes the choir, specifically a 3-part treble voice. Female trio was very popular in America at the end of swing era, represented by the Andrews Sisters and other groups. So it has a strong American popular element there. This element has also appeared in Wagner's Ring, where the 3 rhyme maids sings in 3-part harmony. Such relation also contribute to the fantasy vibes of the scene. Plus, if we look at the score, we can find something familiar. Look at how parallel they are. Although Professor Sawyer doesn't use planning throughout the choir part, we can see how he uses harmony as color rather than a meter of narration. Now we hear the change of music. And we realize that Nat and Arvin are already there. I would argue that at this moment, the narration moves from fantasy and symbolism to reality again. The music here is a very typical bar music, implying that Arvin and Nat are in the secret gay bar in Springfield. The electric bass sneaks in almost as soon as the choir die out. The jumping bass, the use of drum set, and the backbeat and other instruments all suggest that this is the music that would appear in the social context such as party. However, unlike normal party music, it keeps modulating. That to me suggests that the time is flowing in a completely different way here, in an abstract or symbolic way. Equally intriguing is how the party music interweaves with the slow, surreal, floating women choir which we heard earlier, and they intertwine further and further with each other as proceed. In the choir, we can also hear the fragments of Somewhere Over the Rainbow, but it soon breaks into the familiar planning motif at the beginning of the trio. I am truly in love with the acoustic effect made by the piccolo. The third sounds like moving clock, with an allusion to the time. But the high E here is so sharp and so high, making the tick-tock sound especially surreal, and at the same time, reminding me of moving something old. Anyway, we don't need to dig into details too much in music analysis, but I think we would agree that this piccolo sound places the scene under additional dimension. Maybe time, maybe space, making the scene even more ethereal. I also like the staging and lighting that cooperate with music to make the whole scene look surreal, but that is beyond my expertise to pinpoint its effect. I hope this video helped you know Professor Sawyer more as an opera composer. Because of the time limit, I am not able to share all the good things about this award-winning opera. I would recommend you to check the video of the whole production after you finish your final. I want to end this video with the human touch. I think Professor Sawyer's ideas of composition is pretty much contained in this short song. No matter how well the machine can compose, something would always be missing. Human long to be machine, but for machine, it's the human touch that yields the touch of dreams. Sorry Stravinsky, sorry Schoenberg, but it is the human expression that bestows meaning on the sound and makes a composition alive. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to subscribe and hit like, or give it a good grade.
But for machines, it's the human touch, the human touch.